What's up guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of Bonsai-U. This time around we're talking Japanese bonsai terms. All right, before we jump into this week's episode, make sure to like and subscribe, hit that notification bell down below so that you get notified every time we post a new video. That of course helps us out with the YouTube algorithm here. Okay, as I said at the beginning, we're gonna be jumping into learning about Japanese related bonsai terms. Now, it's not that you have to be fluent in Japanese to be good at bonsai. It's not that you really even need to know every single one of these terms necessarily, but I'm sure for a lot of you guys out there who have gone on to bonsai forums or have just searched bonsai on Google, you will have seen a lot of weird Japanese terms popping up here and there. Well, my goal in this video is to provide you an understanding of what those terms mean and how they apply to bonsai, and hopefully this will help you out in going forward building and creating bonsai. All right, first and foremost, let's talk about what the term bonsai actually means. Now, bonsai is made up of two kanji characters, kanji of course being the writing system that was adopted from Chinese by the Japanese. The first character, bon, refers to a tray or a pot, and the second character, sai, refers to the verb essentially to plant. So you could essentially translate bonsai to plant in a container or to plant in a pot. But as you guys know, bonsai encompasses much more than just a potted plant. These trees require specific pruning techniques, wiring techniques, styling. We typically view them from one front, and we typically view them from a specific angle as well, although that's not always the case. But just keep that in mind. Bonsai means to plant in a container. Now, I've had some people in previous episodes tell me that I'm mispronouncing the word bonsai. I'm in fact not mispronouncing it. It is bonsai. A lot of people think that the term bonsai refers to these trees. Bonsai in Japanese is essentially long live the emperor, or 1,000 years to the emperor. This was a chant that was used in World War II and prior to that as well. So don't get that confused. These are referred to as bonsai, not bonsai. All right, next, let's talk about some of the terms that refer to the actual makeup of a bonsai. What I want to do here is start with the base of the tree and we'll work our way up through the trunk up to the apex. So first term here is nebari. Nebari is basically the surface root structure of a tree. Now this term nebari could refer to the radial surface root structure that you see on deciduous trees, as well as the single-sided root structure that you may find on a lot of collected plants as well. All right, moving up the trunk of the tree, the area of the trunk just above the surface roots, just above the nebari, up to essentially the first bend in the trunk is the section of the tree known as the tachiagari. Now, technically you could kind of translate this to standing rising if you wanted to directly translate it, but what it really refers to is that very first section of the trunk, again, just above the nebari before you get kind of to that first bend. Now, this term is one that you may not see that often, but on occasion it does pop up, and it's a good one to know because when we're designing trees and changing the angle of different plants, what we're looking to try to do is eliminate any perpendicular or parallel lines. It's very common for the tachiagari of most plants to be stick straight, totally perpendicular to the ground. So what we like to do is try to angle those so that we can get that perpendicularity a little bit more off on one side or another. It just makes it a bit more interesting. This brings us to the next term, and that is miki, which refers to the trunk itself. So the tachiagari is considered a portion of the miki or a portion of the trunk, but this extends all the way up to the very apex of the tree. Next up, we have the term eda, which refers to the branches. This can be the primary branches or the fine ramification as well. In addition to the word eda, we have something called the sashi eda, which refers specifically to the directional branch of the tree. This refers to the main directional branch that's indicating the overall directionality of the tree. So with this particular tree right beside me here, that would be this branch out on the far left side here. That is our sashi eda. Next up on the list, let's talk about vocabulary words surrounding deadwood features on bonsai. So first and foremost, the number one thing I want to talk about here is the word shari. Shari refers to deadwood on the trunk. Typically we see this mostly with junipers, although sometimes you'll see it on other conifers like pines and spruces as well. But this guy right beside me here is a perfect example of shadi. All of this twisting, crazy deadwood here that makes up the trunk is considered shadi. Next up is the term jin. Jin refers to deadwood branches on the tree. So all of these little features that you see out here that are extending up and out, these would be considered jin. Again, you'll see this mostly on conifers and typically mostly with junipers, although again, sometimes with pines and spruces as well. Next up is a term that's kind of a modifier of the word jin, and that is eda-jin. So eda, as we talked about before, refers to branches. Jin, of course, are dead branches. So when you say eda-jin, what that refers to are live branches with deadwood intertwined down the length of that branch. This is a pretty rare characteristic, although you will find it mostly on junipers and specifically on collected junipers. Okay, so this brings us to the final two terms related to deadwood on bonsai. The first of these is sabamiki. Now, sabamiki refers to hollow trunk trees. You'll find this again mostly with conifers, although sometimes you'll find really interesting examples with deciduous or broadleaf trees like flowering apricot. Now, the tree that's right beside me here, this is a Sierra juniper that was collected near the Lake Tahoe area in California. And you can see right down here at the base of this tree, this is a perfect example of sabamiki or hollow trunk. The final term that's related to the deadwood on trees is actually in reference to the live tissue or live vein that intertwines with that deadwood. And that live tissue is what's referred to as mizusui in Japanese. This means the live vein on the tree. 99% of the time you're going to find this only with junipers, although on very rare occasions with certain pine species you'll see this as well. One of the best examples would be our ponderosa pines here in the United States. Sometimes they produce a really interesting live vein structure as it wraps around the deadwood on a trunk. All right, this brings us to the final term that I want to cover in this episode of Bonsai-U, and that is the word Yamadori. Yamadori refers to trees that are collected out of nature. This could be plants that are collected at higher elevations in the mountains or down at lower elevations, say along the side of a river, for example. Now, the history of Yamadori goes back centuries in Japan, with the most famous examples today being the Itoigawa Shinpaku that are collected out of the Niigata prefecture. And I've actually covered that particular species in more detail in a previous episode of Bonsai-U, so make sure that you check that out to get the full context. Now, I know a lot of you guys out there probably have some moral quandaries about going out and actually collecting, especially very old trees out of nature, but I want you to understand that the plants that we have here at Eisei-en, and really all of the trees that I worked on in Japan that were Yamadori, were all collected with ethical means, meaning that we got permission from the landowners, whether that be privately owned land or publicly owned land, actually going to the government and getting permits to collect those trees. Now, I personally don't go out and actually collect trees myself. I have friends and acquaintances and other folks around the US who do this professionally or semi-professionally, and they do it in a very ethical way, meaning that, again, they get permission, but they also try to collect trees that have a very high chance of survivability. So my recommendation for all of you guys out there, if you plan on going out and actually collecting Yamadori, again, whether that be in your local area or maybe traveling to higher elevation mountains, say in the Rockies, for example, here in the United States, make sure you get permission and also do it in a way where you can guarantee a high survivability rate. In a future episode of Bonsai-U, we'll probably dive into a little bit more detail about how to actually go about that process and make sure that those trees survive. But I wanted to save this term Yamadori for the very end of this episode because it's such a big term and it's one that you're going to see consistently, and there's a lot of layers to it as well. So I hope that this answered a lot of your all's questions about what some of these terms mean, and that it will help you going forward as you dive deeper into your bonsai studies. I want to thank you guys so much for checking out this episode of Bonsai-U. If you like what we do here, make sure you like and subscribe down below. And of course, if you really want to support us, you can click on the link in the description box down below to bounce you over to my website, and you can make a donation to help Bonsai-U going forward. Until the next episode though, take care.